Chapter 3 of Blindfolded. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. Blindfolded by Earle Ashley Walcott. Chapter 3. A Question in the Night. I was stricken dumb at this end to the investigation, and half doubted the evidence of my eyes. "Well," said the policeman, with a sigh of relief, "there's nothing here." I suspected that his doubts of my sanity were returning. "Here is where it was done," I asserted stoutly, pointing to the spot where I had seen the struggling group from the window. "There were surely 5 or 6 men in it." The policeman turned his lantern on the spot. The rough pavement had taken no mark of the scuffle. "It's hard to make sure of things from above in this light," said the policeman, hinting once more his suspicion that I was confusing dreams with reality. "There was no mistaking that job," I said. "See here, the alley leads farther back. Bring your light." "Easy now," said the policeman. "I'll lead the way. Maybe you want one yourself, as your friend has set the fashion." A few paces farther the alley turned at a right angle to the north, yawning dark behind the grim and threatening buildings, and filled with noisome odors. We looked narrowly for a body, and then for traces that might give hint of the passage of a party. "Nothing here," said the policeman as we came out on the other street. "Maybe they've carried him into one of these back-door dens, and maybe they whisked him back into a hack here, and are a mile or two away by now." "But we must follow them. He may be only wounded and can be rescued. And these men can be caught." I was almost hysterical in my eagerness. "Aisy, aisy now," said the policeman. "Go back to your room now. That's the safest place for you, and you can't do nothing at all out here. I'll report the case to the head office, and we'll send out the alarm to the force. Now, here's your door. Just rest aisy, and they'll let you know if anything's found." And he passed on, leaving me dazed with dread and despair in the entrance of the fateful house. The sounds of drunken pleasure were lessening about me. The custom had fallen off in the saloon across the street to such extent that the proprietor was putting up the shutters. The saloon on the corner of the alley was still waiting for stray customers, and I crossed over to it with the thought that the inmates might give me a possible clue. A man half asleep leaned back in a chair by the stove with his chin on his breast. 2 rough-looking men at a table, who were talking in low tones, pretended not to notice my entrance, but their furtive glances gave more eloquent evidence of their interest than the closest stare. The barkeeper eyed me with apparent openness. I called for a glass of wine, partly as an excuse for my visit, and partly to revive my shaken spirits. "Any trouble about here tonight?" I asked in my most affable tone. The barkeeper looked at me with cold suspicion. "No, sir," he said shortly. "This is the quietest neighborhood in town." "I should think there would be a disturbance every time that liquor was sold," was my private comment, as I got the aftertaste of the dose. But I merely wished him good night as I paid for the drink and sauntered out. I promptly got into my doorway before anyone could reach the street to see whither I went, and listened to a growling comment and a mirthless laugh that followed my departure. Hardly had I gained my concealment when the swinging doors of the saloon opened cautiously, and a face peered out into the semi-darkness. With a muttered curse it went back, and I heard the barkeeper's voice in some jest about a failure to be quick enough to catch flies. Once more in the room to wait till morning should give me a chance to work, I looked about the dingy place with a heart sunk to the lowest depths. I was alone in the face of this mystery. I had not one friend in the city to whom I could appeal for sympathy, advice, or money. Yet I should need all of these to follow this business to the end, to learn the fate of my cousin, to rescue him, if alive, and to avenge him, if dead. Then, in the hope that I might find something among Henry's effects to give me a clue to the men who had attacked him, I went carefully through his clothes and his papers. But I found that he did not leave memoranda of his business lying about. The only scrap that could have a possible bearing on it was a sheet of paper in the coat he had changed with me. It bore a rough map, showing a road branching thrice, with crosses marked here and there upon it. Underneath was written, "Third Road, Cockeyed Barn, Iron Cow." Then followed some numerals mixed in a drunken dance with half the letters of the alphabet, the explanation of the map, I supposed, in cipher, and as it might prove the clue to this dreadful business, I folded the sheet carefully in an envelope and placed it in an inmost pocket. The search having failed of definite results, I sat with chair tilted against the wall to consider the situation. Turn it as I would, I could make nothing good of it. There were desperate enterprises afoot of which I could see neither beginning nor end, purpose nor result. I repented of my consent to mix in these dangerous doings, and resolved that when the morning came I would find other quarters, take up the search for Henry, and look for such work as might be found. It was after midnight when I had come to this conclusion, and barring doors and windows as well as I could, I flung myself on the bed to rest. I did not expect to sleep after the exciting events through which I had passed. Yet after a bit the train of mental pictures drawn out by the surging memories of the night became confused and faded away, and I sank into an uneasy slumber. When I awoke it was with a start and an oppressive sense that somebody else was in the room. The gas light that I had left burning had been put out. Darkness was intense. The beating of my own heart was the only sound I could distinguish. I sat upright and felt for the matches that I had seen upon the stand. In another instant I was flung back upon the bed. Wiry fingers gripped my throat, and a voice hissed in my ear, "Where is he? Where is the boy? Give me your papers, or I'll wring the life out of you." I was strong and vigorous, and, though taken at a disadvantage, struggled desperately enough to break the grip on my throat and get a hold upon my assailant. "Where is the boy?" gasped the voice once more, and then, as I made no reply, but twined my arms about him, my assailant saved all his breath for the struggle. We rolled to the floor with a thud that shook the house, and in this change of base I had the luck to come out uppermost. Then my courage rose as I found that I could hold my man. I feared a knife, but if he had one he had not drawn it, and I was able to keep his hands too busy to allow him to get possession of it now. Finding that he was able to accomplish nothing, he gave a short cry and called, "Con!" I heard a confusion of steps outside, and a sound as of a muffled oath. Then the door opened, there was a rush of feet behind me, and the flash of a bull's-eye lantern. I released my enemy, and sprang back to the corner where I could defend myself at some advantage. It was a poor chance for an unarmed man, but I found a chair, and set my teeth to give an account of myself to the first who advanced, and reproached the lack of foresight that had allowed me to lay the revolver under the pillow, instead of putting it in my pocket. I could distinguish 4 dark figures of men, but instead of rushing upon me as I stood on the defensive, they seized upon my assailant. I looked on panting, and hardly able to regain my breath. It was not half a minute before my enemy was securely bound and gagged and carried out. One of the men lingered. "Don't take such risks," he said. "I wouldn't have your job, Mr. Wilton, for all the old man's money. If we hadn't happened up here, you'd have been done for this time." "In God's name, man, what does all this mean?" I gasped. The man looked at me in evident surprise. "They've got a fresh start, I guess," he said. "You'd better get some of the men up here. Mr. Richmond sent us up to bring this letter." He was gone silently, and I was left in the darkness. I struck a match, lighted the gas once more, and, securing the revolver, looked to the letter. The envelope bore no address. I tore it open. The lines were written in a woman's hand, and a faint but peculiar perfume rose from the paper. It bore out these words: "Don't make the change until I see you. The money will be ready in the morning. Be at the bank at 10:30. The note, puzzling as it was hardly an addition to my perplexities. It was evident that I had been plunged into the center of intrigue, plot, and counterplot. I was supposed to have possession of somebody's boy. A powerful and active enemy threatened me with death. An equally active friend was working to preserve my safety. People of wealth were concerned. I had dimly seen a fragment of the struggling forces, and it was plain that only a very rich person could afford the luxury of hiring the bravos and guards who threatened and protected me. How wide were the ramifications of the mystery? Whose was the boy, and what was wanted of him? Had he been stolen from home and parents? Or was he threatened with mortal danger and sent into hiding to keep him from death? The fate of Henry showed the power of those who were pursuing me. Armed as he was with the knowledge of his danger, knowing, as I did not, what he had to guard and from what he had to guard it, he had yet fallen a victim. I could not doubt that he was the man assaulted and stabbed in the alley below, but the fact that no trace of him or of a tragedy was to be found gave me hope that he was still alive. Yet, at best, he was wounded and in the hands of his enemies, a prisoner to the men who had sought his life. It must be, however, that he was not yet recognized. The transfer of the chase to me was proof that the scoundrels had been misled by the resemblance between us, and by the letters found in the coat. They were convinced that he was Giles Dudley, and that I was Henry Wilton. As long as there was hope that he was alive, I would devote myself to searching for him, and to helping him to recover his liberty. As I was hoping, speculating, planning thus, I was startled to hear a step on the stair. The sound was not one that need be thought out of place in such a house and neighborhood, even though the hour was past 4 in the morning, but it struck a chill through me, and I listened with growing apprehension as it mounted step by step. The dread silence of the house that had cast its shadow of fear upon me now seemed to become vocal with protest against this intrusion, and to send warning through the halls. At last the step halted before my door, and a loud knock startled the echoes. With a great bound my heart threw off its tremors, and I grasped the revolver firmly. "Who's there?" "Open the door, sir. I've news for ye." "Who are you?" "Come now, no nonsense. I'm an officer." I unlocked the door and stepped to one side. My bump of caution had developed amazingly in the few hours I had spent in San Francisco, and in spite of his assurance, I thought best to avoid any chance of a rush from my unknown friends, and to put myself in a good position to use my revolver if necessary. The man stepped in and showed his star. He was the policeman I had met when I had run shouting into the street. "I suspicion we've found your friend," he said gravely. "You're wanted at the morgue." "Dead?" I gasped. "Dead as St. Patrick, rest his soul." Chapter 4.